Welcome. We're about to explore a fascinating, yet incredibly complex world, one that touches millions of lives every single day. International non-governmental organizations, or INGOs.
Yeah, and for this conversation, we're drawing on quite a bit of material reflections, lived experiences, particularly looking at Ali al-Mokdad's articles, like The Paradox of NGOs, both the impact and constraints one and the systemic constraints piece, plus, public data and other research.
Right. So our mission today is really to unpack this core paradox of NGOs, how these organizations, which we see as champions of justice and human rights, often find themselves kind of stuck, constrained by the very systems meant to support them.
What's fascinating here, I think, is just how urgent this whole topic feels right now. I mean, NGOs are absolutely indispensable, particularly when things go wrong
Right,
globally.
man.
But their credibility, maybe even their future, really hinges on whether they can grapple with these contradictions. If they can't, well, there's a genuine risk they could just drift into irrelevance. And this isn't just about criticizing them.
No, not at all.
It's more about understanding how we can strengthen what is, at the end of the day, a vital sector.
Okay, let's unpack this then, because we all recognize that immediate, sometimes life-saving impact NGOs have, especially as first responders.
Yeah.
Think about those moments, earthquakes, famines, conflicts, pandemics even. It's the NGOs who are often right there on the ground first.
Providing the essentials.
Exactly. Things like healthcare, food aid, education, clean water, often in some of the most volatile places imaginable. Places where governments, well, either they're unwilling or they simply can't act.
And if we connect that to the bigger picture, their influence goes way beyond just that immediate relief work. NGOs aren't just reacting, they're actually helping shape global change. They consistently push international agendas on really critical issues: gender equality, climate action, refugee rights, you name it.
So they're driving policy shifts.
Absolutely. They contribute to everything from, say, UN resolutions down to national laws. And they do this by amplifying voices that often get ignored, marginalized communities, and by holding governments accountable. They're essentially building up civil society networks that push for that longer-term justice.
That's true. They do have unique advantages. Even huge intergovernmental bodies often rely on them, leveraging that specialized INGO competence for tricky projects. But it's not just about the technical side, is it?
No, not at all.
The sources we looked at really highlight how NGOs act as these, crucial training grounds for local leaders, especially women in developing nations, helping them build skills that last way beyond just one specific program.
Yeah.
You think about organizations like Amnesty International, of their political clout and just their operational reach across borders, it really shows that global presence.
Indeed. I mean, without the relentless work of NGOs, the world would undoubtedly be, well, a much harsher place. You'd likely see greater inequality, more indifference to suffering. They really do act as a kind of vital moral compass in this often fragmented global landscape, constantly reminding us of our shared responsibilities.
Yeah.
Their work fills these voids that, if left empty, would leave millions without a voice, without aid, without hope.
So, okay, that's the powerful, undeniable good they do. But here's where it gets, well, really interesting, as you said. Despite this absolutely vital role, the sources show NGOs are caught in this web of inherent contradictions. There's a sort of profound twist to their story. Ali al-Mokdad, drawing from his experience across different continents, he really focuses on this paradox. They champion justice, but often find themselves hamstrung by the very systems that empower them.
Exactly. And a primary issue, one that's almost intractable, it seems, is their financial dependence.
Ah, the money.
Yeah, the money.
Yeah.
While NGOs talk passionately about independence and neutrality, the reality is many rely heavily on governments and large institutions for funding.
Right.
And the critical insight here, the less obvious part, is that this funding is often tangled up with geopolitical interests, with donor-specific agendas, rather than being purely about the humanitarian need on the ground.
So it's not just that it forces them to follow donor wishes.
Well, it does, but it also subtly redefines what success even looks like. It shifts from genuinely meeting community needs to just satisfying donor metrics,
Right.
which can create this sort of, some call it results theater.
Results theater.
Yeah, where easily measurable outcomes get prioritized,
Mhm.
potentially masking deeper systemic problems. It's a huge dilemma for them.
And you really see this play out starkly in conflict zones, right? Where the politicization of aid tragically leads to gaps in support for people who are deemed, well, politically inconvenient. The
Hmm.
choice they face is agonizing. Do you accept restrictive conditions and maybe compromise your mission? Or do you stand firm and risk not being able to operate at all, failing to deliver any aid? It feels like a lose-lose.
It often is.
Yeah.
And connecting this back, this dependency, often fuels another core issue,
Hmm.
the bureaucratization of NGOs.
Right.
Many started out quite nimble, very grassroots, but they've morphed into these sprawling hierarchical organizations.
Why does that happen?
Well, it's often a direct response to the demands that come with large-scale funding, the need for detailed reporting, strict compliance, centralized oversight. But the irony is, by adopting these sort of corporate structures for efficiency and accountability,
They become slow and inefficient themselves.
exactly, they often inherit that corporate inertia.
It's a fascinating, almost tragic kind of mirroring, isn't it? These groups set out to challenge the status quo, and in some ways they've become these massive institutions themselves.
Yeah.
And those layers of approvals, the internal politics, the constant struggle to align priorities between, say, the country office and HQ, it genuinely delays aid getting to where it needs to go, sometimes with devastating preventable consequences.
And the cost.
Oh, the financial cost must be huge. Inflated admin overhead, money going to endless meetings, maybe redundant roles, excessive reporting instead of directly helping people. It really makes you wonder, at what point does the cost of compliance start to outweigh the actual impact on the ground?
That's the crucial question, isn't it?
Mm.
They risk getting so tangled in their own internal workings that just following procedure becomes more important than fast, effective action.
Mm-hmm.
And this internal focus often means they're looking inwards when their gaze should really be outwards, focused on the communities. Which brings us, I think, to what many see as a really disheartening failure, the broken promise of localization.
Ah, localization. We hear that term a lot.
We do. And despite all the talk about empowering local actors, NGOs often end up keeping most of the control over the money and the big decisions, partly because of donor rules, partly their own concerns about risk.
And that creates this huge, frustrating imbalance. Local responders are always the first ones there when a crisis hits, but they get a tiny fraction of the direct funding. Meanwhile, the big NGOs, often operating from far away, dominate the decision-making. It's not just inefficient, it feels like it keeps that cycle of dependency going.
It does. And it hinders sustainability, and frankly, as some argue, it reinforces these old colonial dynamics in the aid sector.
Which is a stark contrast to the stated goal of empowering communities, isn't it?
It really is. And that leads directly into the accountability question.
Right. Who are they actually answerable to?
Well, NGOs genuinely want to serve the people affected. Structurally, their main accountability is upwards to their donors, not downwards to the communities.
Through financial reporting and things like that?
Exactly. Funding cycles, reporting requirements, they prioritize financial accountability.
Mm.
So decisions often get made far removed from the realities on the ground, which begs the question, if you're not truly accountable to the people you're serving, how effectively can you actually meet their needs?
Which means interventions can become completely misaligned with what people actually need or want.
Precise.
Our sources, including Ali Al-Mokdad's own experiences, share some pretty vivid examples of this. Programs getting copy-pasted from old projects or donor strategies, not really tailored to the local situation.
Yeah, I've heard similar stories.
He talks about seeing families in refugee camps, surrounded by aid groups, yet feeling totally unheard. Getting food they wouldn't eat, shelters that didn't work for them, programs that just didn't fit their lives. Their voices just got lost in all the donor reports.
Reducing them to passive recipients, essentially.
Yeah, instead of active participants in their own recovery.
Exactly. It creates this critical gap between the intention and the actual impact, where the aid ends up meeting donor expectations maybe better than it meets genuine needs. And beyond these core paradoxes, there are other critiques, too, which add to this growing public skepticism we see.
Yeah, things like poaching experienced staff from smaller local organizations.
Which undermines local capacity.
Right. Or self-censorship, where they might not speak out about abuses to maintain access in difficult places. And even sometimes ethical lapses that come to light. Mm-hmm. And then there's that really provocative argument some people make, that NGOs might maybe inadvertently benefit from problems continuing. that there could be incentives against finding long-term solutions because their existence, their funding model, depends on
It's
crises.
a harsh criticism,
Yeah.
definitely, and maybe an oversimplification for many dedicated people working in the sector, but it's a viewpoint that is gaining some traction.
It is, and it contributes to this wider decline in public trust, doesn't it? You see governments putting more restrictions on NGO activities, media highlighting inefficiencies, sometimes donations declining.
Especially in more authoritarian contexts, those controls get even tighter, limiting their scope and making their work even more dangerous.
And this is crucial. It's not like this paradox is insurmountable, right? Many NGOs are actively trying to adapt to navigate these contradictions. The sources highlight some really promising ways forward. This isn't just about tearing them down.
No, absolutely not. It's about understanding and improving a really vital sector. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, many organizations are embracing more entrepreneurial approaches. They're using things like systems mapping, fostering genuine collaboration to try and influence broader systemic change, not just delivering isolated projects.
How does that work in practice?
Well, for example, some INGOs are developing things like shared services platforms. Multiple organizations pool resources for back-end stuff like HR or logistics. That can drastically cut admin costs and free up more money for actual programs.
That's fascinating. And what about localization? Is that actually happening?
It's uneven, definitely, but yes, it is progressing in some areas. We are seeing more examples where organizations, sometimes with support from bodies like the EU or the UN, are genuinely empowering local actors to take the lead.
So local groups aren't just subcontractors anymore.
Ideally, no. They're receiving direct funding, they're leading the strategic design, making the key decisions, and that shift makes the interventions far more relevant, more accepted by the communities themselves. It helps get past that copy-paste problem we talked about.
Right.
And a huge part of this evolution has to be diversifying funding sources.
Moving away from just relying on big government grants.
Exactly. NGOs are actively looking at private partnerships, developing innovative social enterprises, even using grassroots mobilization and crowdfunding more effectively.
So that gives them more autonomy.
Potentially, yes.
Yeah.
It reduces that heavy dependence on just a few big institutional donors, which can lessen the pressure to align with purely geopolitical interests. For instance, some are exploring impact investing models, attracting private money that looks for both a financial return and measurable social impact, not just traditional grants.
And what about tackling that bureaucracy internally?
That's gaining traction too. Moving away from all those layers of approval, it involves decentralizing decision-making, pushing authority down closer to the communities, and creating more community-focused ways of being accountable.
So not just reporting upwards to donors?
Right. Implementing feedback loops, participatory methods where the people being served actually have a genuine say in how programs are designed and evaluated. It fundamentally redefines who they're answerable to, or it should. Look, the sector knows it needs to evolve to stay relevant, especially with donor fatigue setting in, more competition from capable local groups, and those growing reputational risks. Philanthropy can play a massive role here, not just funding programs, but investing strategically in building ING capacity itself, supporting organizational development, adaptive learning, fostering innovation.
Yeah.
You see discussions online, like on X recently, really emphasizing honoring the dedication of aid workers while still pushing hard for reforms. Things like decolonizing aid, genuinely shifting power dynamics.
So putting it all together, what does this mean for the future of NGOs? It feels like it really hinges on genuine transformation.
I think so.
It's about prioritizing equity, becoming more agile, really championing local leadership to maximize their impact without just perpetuating those old dependencies. It's a balanced view, right? Recognizing their immense value, but also urging them to be accountable, to fulfill that promise of systemic change.
Yeah, the choice facing NGOs feels pretty stark. Adapt, and adapt swiftly, or risk becoming irrelevant. It's not enough just to acknowledge the flaws.
No.
It's about actively dismantling the structures holding them back, shifting real power, real resources to local actors, challenging those restrictive funding models, redefining accountability around the people they actually serve. They have the potential to lead some truly revolutionary progress if they're brave enough to evolve. So the question for you listening in is, what further questions does all this raise for you?
You'll find links and resources in the description if you want to explore these ideas further. We really hope you keep engaging with this, keep questioning, keep imagining with us.
And next time, we promise we'll take this conversation even further. We're not going to reveal the topic just yet, but we think you'll find it really interesting.
Until then, keep imagining, keep questioning, and keep building.